The transport ship docked at Nexus Academy with a soft hiss of releasing pressure seals. Through the wide viewing windows, the three human students could see the massive station floating in space, like a gleaming city of metal and glass. Harmony Station was the size of a small moon, with towering spires that stretched toward distant stars and rotating sections that created artificial gravity for different species. Jiwoo Kim pressed his face against the cool window and watched. Alien ships of all shapes and sizes moving around the station. Some looked like flowing liquid metal. Others resembled giant flowers made of crystal. And a few appeared to be living creatures swimming through space. He had never seen so many different types of beings in one place. "Stop staring like that," Minji Park said with a gentle smile as she adjusted her travel bag. "You look like you have never left Earth before." "I have not left Earth before," Jiwoo replied quietly. At 19, he was the oldest of the three humans, but his soft voice and careful way of speaking made him seem younger. "Have you seen anything like this on the news feeds?" "The news feeds do not do it justice," said Hyun Lee, as he checked his equipment cases one more time. The 20-year-old engineering student was always practical and organized. "Look at those docking rings. They must rotate at different speeds for different gravity needs. The engineering alone must be incredible." The transport captain, a friendly blue-skinned alien with 4 arms, announced over the communication system that they would be docking in 5 minutes. The three humans gathered their belongings and made their way to the exit. Each of them carried standard travel cases, though Jiwoo seemed to be making very soft sounds that only he could hear. As they walked through the docking tube, Minji felt her heart beating faster. She had always dreamed of studying interspecies relations, and now she was actually going to live and learn alongside beings from dozens of different worlds. Her diplomatic training had prepared her for this moment, but the reality was still overwhelming. The main entrance to Nexus Academy opened before them like the mouth of a great cathedral. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into shadows, and the walls were covered with symbols from every known civilization in the galaxy. Students of all different species moved through the vast space, their voices creating a symphony of sounds that no single world could produce. Jiwoo watched a group of floating jellyfish-like creatures drift past, their bodies glowing with soft purple light. Behind them walked tall insect beings with multiple arms and compound eyes that reflected light like diamonds. Near an information kiosk, crystalline humanoids that looked like living gemstones were speaking to each other in musical tones that sounded like wind chimes. "Welcome, new students," said a warm voice from above. The three humans looked up to see a being that looked like a massive tree walking on root legs. Its bark was silver and gold, and its leaves rustled even though there was no wind. "I am Director Counselor Zephys. Please follow the blue lights on the floor to Orientation Hall 7. The humans followed the glowing blue line through corridors filled with other new students. Everywhere they looked, they saw amazing sights. A group of aquatic beings moved through tubes filled with water that ran along the walls. Tiny fairy-like creatures no bigger than Minji's hand flew in formation through the air. Large bear-like animals with 6 legs walked upright and carried books in their massive paws. But Jiwoo noticed something else as they walked. Many of the alien students stopped talking when the humans passed by. Some pointed at them and whispered to their friends. A few actually stepped back or moved to the other side of the corridor. "They are afraid of us," he said quietly to his companions. "Can you blame them?" Hyun replied with a slight frown. "Earth has a reputation as a death world. Most of their planets are safe and controlled. They probably think we are dangerous just for surviving on Terra." Minji tried to smile and wave at some of the alien students, but they looked away quickly. She had studied xenopsychology and knew that many species found humans disturbing. Humans had no natural weapons like claws or fangs, no armor plating or venom, but they came from a world where everything seemed designed to kill them. To many aliens, this made humans seem either incredibly lucky or incredibly dangerous. Orientation Hall 7 was a circular room with seating areas designed for many different body types. The three humans found seats near the back, where they could observe without making other students uncomfortable. Around them, the alien students clustered in groups with others of their own species or similar types. Director Counselor Zephys entered the room through a door that grew larger as he approached it. His voice filled the space without being loud, and his words were automatically translated into each student's native language through small devices they had been given. "Students of Nexus Academy," he began. "You come from 97 different worlds and represent the future of galactic cooperation. Here you will learn not just science and technology, but how to understand beings whose thoughts and cultures are completely different from your own. The director explained the basic rules of academy life. Students would live in dormitories designed for their specific environmental needs. Classes would be taught by professors from many different species. Most importantly, each student was allowed to bring one companion organism from their home world to help with psychological comfort and adjustment. However, Zephys continued with a gentle but firm tone, all companion organisms must be approved by academy safety officials and must pose no threat to other students or academy property. Around the room, alien students began talking excitedly about their companions. The floating jellyfish beings, who called themselves the Lumina Collective, had brought glowing spores that created beautiful light patterns in the air. A student named Sola demonstrated by releasing a handful of the spores, which began dancing through the air like tiny stars. The insect students from the hive worlds had brought small worker bugs that were incredibly organized and helpful. A student named Thrix showed how his workers could arrange and clean items with perfect efficiency. They moved in perfect coordination, like they shared a single mind. The crystalline students from the silicon reaches had brought resonating crystals that could produce haunting melodies. A student named Vex played a brief song that sounded like voices singing across vast distances. When it was their turn, the other students looked at the three humans expectantly. They wanted to know what kind of companions the famous Deathworld survivors had brought with them. The humans looked at each other for a long moment. Jiwoo shifted uncomfortably in his seat and glanced toward the travel cases they had placed nearby. Minji cleared her throat and spoke in her most diplomatic voice. "We are still getting our companions settled in," she said carefully. "Earth animals can be sensitive to new environments. We want to make sure they are comfortable before introducing them to everyone." This seemed to satisfy most of the alien students, though some looked disappointed. A few whispered among themselves about what kind of creatures could be so delicate that they needed special care. But as the orientation continued, Jiwoo could hear very soft sounds coming from his case. A quiet whimper, barely audible above the voices in the room. He gently tapped the side of the case twice and the sound stopped. Inside the case, something shifted and settled. The other humans heard it too, but they did not react. They had agreed to keep their companions hidden until they better understood how the other species might react. Earth animals were not like the pretty spores or helpful worker bugs that the other students had brought. Earth animals were something else entirely. As the orientation ended and students began filing out to find their dormitories, Hyun picked up his cases and noticed how some of the alien students still watched them nervously. "They think we are dangerous because we survived Terra," he said quietly. "Wait until they meet our friends," Jiwoo replied with a small smile. "Then they will really understand what dangerous means." But as they walked toward their assigned dormitory wing, none of the three humans were thinking about danger. They were thinking about the warm, loyal, loving creatures waiting patiently in their travel cases. Creatures who had chosen to be humanity's partners long ago, when the world was wild and full of threats. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn what it truly meant to be friends with a Deathworld species. The first week of classes at Nexus Academy brought surprises that made the alien students even more nervous about their human classmates. In Professor Kleet's survival simulation course, the three humans performed in ways that left other species exhausted and frightened. The rabbit-like Professor Kleet had designed the course to test how different species handled dangerous situations. The first simulation was a simple asteroid field navigation exercise. Most students needed their ship's computer systems and careful planning to avoid the floating rocks. Jiwoo completed the course in half the expected time, manually piloting his ship through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow. When Kleet asked him how he had calculated the trajectories so quickly, Jiwoo simply said, "I watched the patterns and felt where the safe spaces were." During a toxic atmosphere survival scenario, Minji helped her mixed-species team when others began panicking about the poisonous gas readings. While her teammates worried about equipment failure, she calmly found alternative shelter and organized a systematic search for clean air pockets. The most impressive performance came from Hyun during an ion storm navigation exercise. When the simulation threw electrical storms and magnetic interference at the student ships, most of the alien students became overwhelmed by the chaos and unpredictability. Their ships spun helplessly as the artificial storm raged around them. Hyun guided his team through the storm with steady confidence. He seemed to understand instinctively how the electrical patterns would move and where the safe passages would appear. When Sola asked him how he knew what to do, Hyun replied, "Weather on Earth changes fast and can kill you. You learn to read the signs or you do not survive long." But it was not just their performance in class that made the other students suspicious. Strange things were happening in the human dormitory wing that no one could explain. At night, other students reported hearing unusual sounds from the human quarters. Thrix told his roommate that he had heard soft chirping noises coming from Jiwoo's room around midnight. The insect student was confused because his sensitive hearing had never detected similar sounds from any of the other companion organisms. Sola mentioned to her friends that she had detected brief flashes of movement in the corridors near the human rooms during her evening light meditation sessions. When she tried to focus her luminous spores to see what was moving, the shapes disappeared too quickly to identify. Vex reported hearing low-frequency sounds that seemed almost like communication, but unlike any language in the galactic databases, the crystalline student's natural ability to detect sonic vibrations made her certain that something was making deliberate noises in the human wing after dark. The cafeteria staff also noticed odd behavior from the three humans. Jiwoo frequently requested large portions of raw meat, claiming that humans needed high-protein diets for proper brain function. When the confused food service workers asked why he did not cook the meat first, he said it was for a special Earth nutrition practice. Minji spent hours in the Academy's hydroponics bay, requesting seeds and plant samples that she claimed were for a cultural heritage project about Earth agriculture. But the botanist staff noticed that she seemed more interested in plants that produced strong scents and dense ground cover than in typical food. Crops Hyun had submitted dozens of work orders for unusual modifications to his dormitory room. He wanted multiple perches installed at different heights, additional ventilation systems, and reinforced flooring that could handle impacts from above. When maintenance asked why he needed these changes, he said they were for Earth meditation practices that required special equipment. The alien students began whispering among themselves about what the humans might be hiding. During study sessions, they would gather in small groups and share theories about the mysterious sounds and behaviors. Maybe they brought weapons, disguised as companion animals, suggested a student from the Spiral Arm Confederacy, or perhaps their companions are actually technological devices that mimic living creatures, offered another. What if they are conducting secret experiments on behalf of the Earth government? Whispered a third. The speculation reached a peak when a maintenance drone performing routine air quality checks reported detecting multiple unregistered life signs in the human dormitory wing. The drone's sensors indicated that there were definitely living creatures in the human rooms. But the biological signatures were too scrambled by interference to identify the species or size. Academy security began investigating quietly. Captain Vorth, the station's chief security officer, was a professional being who had dealt with many different species. But even she found the situation puzzling. The humans had submitted all the proper paperwork for companion organisms, but they had not yet presented the creatures for the required safety inspection. When Captain Vorth requested a meeting with the three humans, they politely agreed to cooperate, but asked for a few more days to help their companions adjust to the station environment. They explained that Earth animals could become stressed and unpredictable when moved to completely alien surroundings. This explanation seemed reasonable, but it only made the other students more nervous. If Earth animals were so sensitive that they needed special adjustment time, what did that say about how dangerous they might be when startled or threatened? The situation became even more mysterious during Professor Kleet's xenobiology class. The nervous instructor was teaching about apex predator adaptations across different worlds. He showed examples of creatures with massive fangs, razor-sharp claws, armored plates, and deadly venom. "It is interesting to note," Professor Kleet said while looking directly at the human students, "that some species achieve dominance not through individual physical advantages, but through other means. Humans, for example, have no natural weapons despite coming from one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy." The alien students turned to stare at Jiwoo, Minji, and Hyun. How had these apparently defenseless beings survived on a planet that was famous for its deadly creatures and harsh environments? Jiwoo raised his hand politely. "Professor, may I ask a question?" Of course, Cleet replied, though his ears flattened nervously against his head. You say humans have no natural weapons. But what if we did not need them? The classroom fell completely silent. Every alien student was now focused entirely on Jiwoo, waiting to hear what he meant. What if, Jiwoo continued in his quiet, thoughtful voice, humans survived not by being the strongest or fastest or most dangerous, but by making friends with the creatures that were. Professor Cleet's whiskers twitched anxiously. Friends? With apex predators? We had friends, Jiwoo said simply. Very good friends. The class ended in uncomfortable silence. As the alien students filed out, they whispered urgently among themselves. What kind of friends could survive on a death world alongside humans? And what did it mean that these friends were now living in the academy dormitories? That night, the sounds from the human wing seemed louder and more frequent. Thrix reported hearing what sounded like multiple creatures moving around in different rooms. Sola's light spores flickered nervously whenever she tried to meditate near the human quarters. Vex's crystals produced discordant notes that spoke of tension and unease. In his room, Jiwoo sat quietly on his bed and opened one of his travel cases. A large shape moved in the darkness, and warm brown eyes reflected the soft light from the corridor outside his window. Soon, Bruno, he whispered gently. Very soon everyone will meet you properly. The shape in the darkness made a soft sound of contentment and settled down to wait. Outside, the academy continued its normal nighttime routine, unaware that everything was about to change. The emergency alarm started at 0347 station time, its harsh sound echoing through every corridor of Nexus Academy. Students throughout the massive station woke to flashing red lights and the voice of Director Counselor Zephys announcing over the communication system. All students remain in your dormitories. We are experiencing a major systems failure due to solar flare activity. Emergency teams are responding. In the human wing, Jiwoo sat up immediately in his bed. He had learned on Earth that when alarms sound, you do not wait to understand what is happening. You prepare for action first and ask questions later. Beside him, a large shape stirred in the darkness. It is time. Bruno, he said quietly, down the corridor. Minji was already checking her emergency supplies when she heard scratching sounds from one of her travel cases. She opened it carefully and a magnificent red-tailed hawk emerged, stretching wings that seemed impossibly large for the small room. I know, Sky, she whispered. You want to fly? Soon you will have important work to do. In the third human room, Hyun was studying the schematic displays on his wall computer when a sleek black cat jumped onto his desk, looking at him with bright yellow eyes that seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation. You feel it too, do you not, Pepper? Hyun said as he scratched behind the cat's ears. Something is very wrong with this station. The three humans met in the corridor outside their rooms, each accompanied by their companions. For the first time since arriving at the academy, the mysterious earth creatures were fully visible. Bruno was a massive German shepherd with thick brown and black fur, intelligent eyes and powerful muscles that moved smoothly under his coat. He stood nearly as tall as Jiwoo's waist and weighed more than most of the alien students. Sky was a red-tailed hawk with sharp eyes and talons that could crush bones. Her wingspan was wider than Minji could reach with both arms, and her beak was designed for tearing prey apart. Pepper appeared smaller than the others, but her movements showed the controlled power of a perfect predator. Her retractable claws and silent steps marked her as a creature built for hunting in darkness. To most galactic species, these three animals would appear to be walking nightmares, apex predators from a death world, perfectly designed for killing. But as the station shook from another power fluctuation, the three creatures looked to their human companions with expressions of trust and readiness to help. The main power grid has failed, Hyun said after checking his portable scanner. Life support is running on emergency backup, but it will not last long with this many people on the station. We need to help, Minji said firmly. The other species do not know how to handle emergencies like this. Their worlds are too safe. They have never learned crisis response. The corridor lights flickered and went out completely. In the darkness, they could hear sounds of panic from other parts of the dormitory. Alien students were crying out in fear and confusion as their safe, controlled environment suddenly became unpredictable and dangerous. But the humans and their companions moved through the darkness without hesitation. Bruno's enhanced senses guided them toward the sounds of students in trouble. Sky's sharp eyes could see clearly even in the dim emergency lighting. Pepper moved silently ahead of the group, checking for obstacles and dangers. They found Sola trapped in her room when the door mechanism failed during a power surge. The floating jellyfish-like being was panicking because her species needed constant air circulation to survive, and the ventilation system had stopped working. Hyun examined the door controls while Pepper slipped through a maintenance gap to reach the manual release on the other side. Meanwhile, Bruno used his powerful sense of smell to locate a portable air circulation unit in a nearby storage closet. When the door finally opened, Sola drifted out, gasping with relief. But when she saw the 3 large Earth creatures, her light spores flickered in terror. "Do not be afraid," Jiwoo said gently. "They are here to help you." Before Sola could respond, Bruno carefully picked up the air circulation unit in his mouth and placed it near her, then stepped back and sat patiently while Hyun activated the device. The big dog's tail wagged slightly when he saw that Sola was breathing more easily. "Your predator," Sola whispered in amazement. "It shows concern for others." They found Thrix next, trapped under fallen ceiling panels in the main study hall. The insect student's hard exoskeleton had protected him from serious injury, but he was stuck and his worker bugs were too small to move the heavy debris. Sky flew up to the damaged ceiling to assess the structural damage while Minji and Jiwoo worked with Bruno to carefully lift the fallen panels. The big dog's strength was incredible, but he moved with perfect control to avoid causing further collapse or injury. As they worked, more alien students began appearing in the corridors, drawn by the sounds of rescue activity. They expected to see Academy emergency teams, but instead they found 3 humans working calmly with creatures that looked like they belonged in alien nightmares about Deathworlds. Vex arrived just as they were helping Thrix to his feet. The crystalline student's harmonic voice created discordant notes of fear when she saw the earth animals. "Those are apex predators," she sang in alarm. "Why are they not attacking? Why do they follow your commands?" "They do not follow commands," Minji explained, while Sky landed gracefully on her outstretched arm. "They are our partners. They choose to help because that is what friends do." The emergency grew worse as more systems failed throughout the station. The artificial gravity began fluctuating, making movement difficult for species that were not adapted to changing conditions. The atmosphere recycling system started producing warning alerts about dangerous gas buildups in several sections. But while the alien students struggled with each new crisis, the humans and their companions adapted instantly. They had evolved together on a world where conditions could change without warning, where cooperation meant survival and hesitation meant death. Bruno's sensitive nose detected a gas leak before the sensors did, leading them to a group of young students who were unconscious from breathing contaminated air. Sky flew through dangerous areas to activate manual emergency controls that were too high for ground-based beings to reach. Pepper's night vision allowed her to navigate safely through sections where the emergency lighting had completely failed. Most amazing to the watching alien students was how the Earth creatures worked together with perfect coordination. When Bruno found injured students, he would carefully lift them in his mouth without leaving a single tooth mark. When Sky retrieved emergency supplies from high storage areas, she would drop them precisely where Pepper could catch them and carry them to where they were needed. "I do not understand," Thrix said, as he watched Bruno gently carry a injured young Lumina to safety. "On my world, apex predators consume the weak. Why does yours protect them?" Jiwoo looked at his 4-legged friend with obvious affection. "Because Bruno understands that protecting the weak makes everyone stronger. That is what pack animals learn." "Pack animals?" Vex asked, her crystalline voice showing confusion. "Social hunters," Minji explained. "On Earth, the most successful predators learned to work together. They learned that cooperation creates better outcomes than competition." By the time the Academy's official emergency teams arrived, the 3 humans and their animal companions had already rescued 17 students from 6 different species and helped restore power to 3 critical life support sections. Director. Counselor Zephys found them in the main corridor, surrounded by alien students who were staring at the Earth creatures with expressions of awe and terror. "I do not understand what I am seeing," the ancient tree being said as his leaves rustled with confusion. "These are clearly dangerous predators from your death world, but they appear to be protecting other species." Jiwoo looked around at the rescued alien students, then back at the director. "They are not just predators, Counselor Zephys. They are family, and family protects each other even when the others are different. Bruno sat beside Jiwoo and looked up at the towering director with calm, intelligent eyes. His tail wagged once, slowly, as if he was trying to communicate peaceful intentions. Sky preened her feathers while perched on Minji's shoulder, occasionally looking around the group with sharp eyes that missed nothing but showed no aggression toward the alien students. Pepper rubbed against Hyun's legs and purred softly, a sound that many of the alien students had never heard before but somehow understood as expressing contentment and affection. Family, Director Zephys repeated slowly. You call apex predators family. Yes, all three humans said together. The alien students continued staring, trying to process what they had witnessed. The creatures they had feared as walking weapons had just spent hours risking themselves to save beings from completely different species. The Deathworld predators had shown more compassion and cooperation than many supposedly civilized species, managed in peaceful situations as emergency. Power was restored and normal lighting returned to the station. The true scope of what had happened became clear. The three humans and their animal companions had not just helped with the crisis, they had led the rescue efforts while trained emergency teams were still trying to assess the situation. And they had done it all, not through superior technology or individual strength. The news spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light itself. Within hours of the emergency at Nexus Academy, every major news network was broadcasting the same shocking story. Deathworld humans bring apex predators to Academy. The holographic news report showed dramatic footage of Bruno carrying injured alien students in his massive jaws. They showed Sky flying through dangerous areas with her razor-sharp talons extended. They showed Pepper moving silently through darkened corridors, with her predator eyes glowing in the emergency lighting, but the news reports did not show the gentle care with which Bruno handled the injured students. They did not mention that Sky had risked her own safety to help others. They did not explain that Pepper had guided rescue teams to trapped victims. All the galaxy saw were three apex predators from Terra working alongside the humans who had supposedly brought them as companion animals to a peaceful academy. The reaction was immediate and terrifying for most alien species. The Crystalline Council announced that they were reviewing all diplomatic agreements with Earth. The Spiral Arm Confederacy demanded an emergency session of the Galactic Security Board. Even species that had been friendly to humans began questioning whether Terra should be allowed to participate in interstellar civilization at Nexus Academy. The three human students found themselves at the center of a galactic controversy that threatened to destroy everything they had hoped to achieve. We have received over 3,000 messages demanding your immediate expulsion, Director Counselor Zephys informed them during an emergency meeting in his office. His ancient bark looked more weathered than usual, and his leaves drooped with stress. 17 different species are threatening to withdraw their students if you remain here. The three humans sat quietly while their animal companions waited nearby. Bruno lay on the floor with his head resting on his paws, looking sad but alert. Sky perched on a specially installed stand, occasionally turning her head to watch the director with one bright eye. Pepper sat in Hyun's lap, purring softly but watching everything with typical feline awareness. What do they want us to do? Minji asked. The Galactic Council has called for a formal tribunal, Zephys replied heavily. You will be required to explain why you brought what they are calling weapons of war to an institution dedicated to peace and learning. Weapons of war? Jiwoo looked down at Bruno, who was now gently licking his own paw. Bruno has never hurt anyone in his entire life. That is not how they see it, Zephys said sadly. To most species in the galaxy, your companions represent their worst fears about Deathworld evolution. They see perfect killing machines that somehow obey human commands. Hyun scratched Pepper behind the ears, causing her purr to grow louder. They do not obey commands. They make their own choices. That makes it even worse, Zephys replied. If they are not controlled by technology or training, then what prevents them from turning on other species whenever they choose? The tribunal was held 3 days later in the Academy's largest assembly hall. Representatives from 47 different species attended either in person or through holographic projection. The three humans sat at a small table in the center of the vast room, with their animal companions beside them. The lead prosecutor was Ambassador Drex, a tall reptilian being whose own species came from a harsh world where only the strongest survived. His scales glittered under the bright lights as he pointed an accusing claw at the humans. "These creatures," he hissed, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems, "represent everything dangerous about Deathworld evolution. Look at them. Massive jaws designed for crushing bones, talons built for tearing flesh, claws made for killing silently in darkness." The assembled aliens murmured agreement. When they looked at Bruno, Sky, and Pepper, they saw only the weapons that evolution had given them. Ambassador Drex continued his presentation, with holographic displays showing Earth's most dangerous predators. Lions hunting in packs, sharks attacking with rows of teeth, eagles diving at incredible speeds to strike their prey. "This is the world these humans come from," Drex declared. "A planet where apex predators rule through violence and consume the weak without mercy. And these humans claim to have made friends with such creatures." The murmur from the audience grew louder and more worried. Several representatives exchanged nervous glances. "Furthermore," Drex said as his display changed to show footage from the recent emergency, "these predators somehow coordinate their actions with perfect precision. They respond to situations faster than trained emergency teams. They work together as if they share a single mind." He paused dramatically and looked directly at the three humans. "I submit that these are not companion animals at all, but biological weapons. The humans have somehow created the perfect soldiers, combining the loyalty of domesticated creatures with the killing power of apex predators." The tribunal chamber erupted in concerned voices from dozens of species. Several representatives called for immediate action. Others demanded that Earth be quarantined until the threat could be assessed. Director Counselor Zephas called for order, then looked at the three human students with sympathy in his ancient eyes. "You may now present your defense." Minji stood slowly and walked to the center of the chamber. Around her, representatives from across the galaxy watched with suspicion and fear. She looked small and vulnerable compared to the massive alien beings surrounding her, but her voice was clear and strong when she spoke. "Honored representatives," she began, "you call our friends weapons, but you do not understand what they truly are." She gestured toward Bruno, who had remained lying quietly, despite all the hostile voices around him. "You see a creature designed for killing, but I see a being whose ancestors chose to hunt alongside early humans instead of competing with them. Thousands of generations ago, when both our species were struggling to survive, wolves and humans discovered that cooperation was stronger than competition." Sky spread her wings slightly, drawing gasps from several alien representatives who instinctively feared flying predators. "You see talons built for tearing flesh," Minji continued. "But Sky's ancestors chose to work with human hunters instead of stealing their prey. Hawks learned that humans could provide reliable food and safe nesting places in exchange for their incredible eyesight and flying abilities." Pepper jumped down from Hyun's lap and walked calmly across the chamber floor, her paws making no sound on the hard surface. "You see a silent killer," Minji said as Pepper sat down and began grooming herself peacefully. "But cats chose to live with humans because they discovered that human settlements attracted the small prey they hunted. We gave them shelter, and they gave us protection from pests." The chamber had grown quieter as Minji spoke, but the alien representative still looked unconvinced. "You call this domestication?" Ambassador Drex interrupted. "But domestication implies control through force or breeding manipulation. These creatures are clearly not diminished versions of their wild ancestors." Jiwoo stood up to join Minji. "You are right, Ambassador. They are not domesticated. They are partners." He walked over to Bruno and knelt beside the big dog. Bruno chooses to help others because that is what pack animals do. His wolf ancestors learned that the pack survives best when every member is protected, even the weak ones. Bruno looked up at Jiwoo with obvious affection, then stood and walked directly toward the alien representatives. Several of them moved back in fear, but Bruno simply sat down in front of Ambassador Drex and looked up at the tall reptilian being with calm, friendly eyes. "He is not showing submission," Jiwoo explained. "He is showing trust. He believes that if you understand him, you will not be afraid." Hyun joined his friends in the center of the chamber. "On Earth, our world tried to kill us every day. Predators, diseases, storms, earthquakes, volcanoes. We survived not because we became the strongest individual species, but because we learned to work together with other species. Pepper had finished grooming herself and was now walking among the alien representatives, rubbing against the legs of beings who looked terrified of her presence. Her purr was audible throughout the chamber. "She is not marking territory," Hyun explained. "She is sharing her scent as a sign of friendship. To her, you are all part of her extended family now." Sky suddenly took flight, causing several representatives to duck in panic. But instead of attacking, she flew in a graceful circle around the chamber, then landed gently on the perch that had been set up near the human table. "Sky could strike any of you from above faster than you could react," Minji said calmly, "but she chooses not to, because she understands that we are here to talk, not to fight." The chamber was completely silent now. Every alien representative was staring at the three Earth creatures, who were displaying behaviors that contradicted everything they thought they knew about apex predators. Ambassador Drex looked down at Bruno, who was still sitting peacefully in front of him. The big dog's tail wagged once slowly as if he was trying to communicate something important. "I do not understand," Drex said, his voice much quieter than before. "On my world, predators consume the weak. They do not protect them. They do not show affection to other species. They certainly do not choose cooperation over domination. That is because your world taught different lessons than ours did." J. The rescue ship launched from Nexus Academy with minimal supplies and maximum determination. The three human students and their animal companions had volunteered for what every alien species considered a suicide mission. But as they flew toward the attacked research station, none of them seemed afraid. "Target is Research Station Gamma 7, Minji announced from the pilot seat while Sky perched beside her, watching the starfield through the forward viewport. 3 different species were conducting joint studies there: crystalline researchers, aquatic beings, and energy-based life forms. Jiwoo studied the tactical display from the communication station. Bruno sat beside him, occasionally looking at the screen as if he understood the symbols showing enemy positions. "Pirates are from the Scar Fleet," Jiwoo reported. "Reptilian warriors who believe only strength matters. They have taken hostages and are demanding ransom payments from the home governments. The research station is badly damaged," Hyun added from the engineering console while Pepper walked across his keyboard, somehow managing to step only on keys that brought up useful information. "Toxic atmosphere in most sections, collapsed structures, and active weapon systems still firing randomly." The rescue ship was small and fast, designed for emergency evacuations rather than combat. Against the 3 massive Scarfleet warships surrounding the research station, it looked like a minnow swimming toward sharks. But as they approached the battle zone, the humans and their companions began working with the seamless coordination that had amazed the alien students back at the academy. Sky took flight within the ship's small cargo bay, using her incredible eyesight to spot details that the ship's sensors missed. She called out in sharp cries that Minji somehow understood, adjusting their approach to avoid patrol ships and weapon emplacements. Bruno's enhanced hearing detected communication signals bleeding through the ship's audio systems. His head tilted at different angles as he listened to frequencies that human ears could not process. Then he would nudge Jiwoo and point with his nose toward specific controls. Pepper moved silently through the ship, checking systems and somehow identifying potential problems before they became critical failures. Her sensitive whiskers detected air pressure changes that warned of hull stress, and her night vision allowed her to spot issues in poorly lit maintenance areas. "There," Jiwoo said as Bruno alerted him to a weak signal. "Survivors are transmitting from Section C mixed species. Sounds like they are trapped but alive." "Can we get in there?" Minji asked while Sky flew back to her shoulder and whispered information in a series of soft calls. Hyun studied his displays, while Pepper sat on his console and stared at the screen, as if she was analyzing the data herself. "Not through normal docking ports," he said finally. "But there is a maintenance airlock that might work if we can reach it without being detected." The rescue began with a level of tactical precision that would have impressed military commanders across the galaxy. But what made it truly remarkable was how the humans and animals worked together, as if they shared a single mind. Sky flew reconnaissance missions through sections of the damaged station that were too dangerous for ships or people. Her natural ability to navigate in 3 dimensions allowed her to map safe passages through collapsed corridors and identify where hostages were being held. Bruno's incredible sense of smell guided them to survivors who were trapped behind debris or hidden in emergency shelters. Even through the ship's sealed atmosphere, he could detect the chemical signatures of fear, injury, and different alien biochemistries. Pepper scouted ahead of the rescue team, moving silently through areas where any sound might alert guards. Her natural stealth abilities and quick reflexes allowed her to disable security sensors and clear safe paths for the others. But the real test came when they encountered the pirates, directly. The Scarfleet warriors were reptilian, beings from a harsh desert world where only the strongest survived. They were larger than humans with natural armor plating and razor-sharp claws. Their society was built on the principle that power came from the ability to dominate others through superior strength and ruthlessness. When the lead pirate, Commander Score, first saw the three humans and their animal companions, he laughed with genuine amusement. The soft species sends children and pets to rescue their people, he hissed through his translator. This will be easier than taking food from hatchlings, but Commander Score's amusement faded quickly when he realized that the pets were not behaving like any domesticated animals he had ever heard of. Bruno positioned himself between injured hostages and armed pirates, growling deep in his chest with a sound that spoke of pack protection and territory defense. But he did not attack immediately. Instead, he held his ground and watched the pirates with intelligent eyes that seemed to be calculating tactics and measuring threats. Sky circled overhead, staying just out of reach of weapons fire, but close enough to dive bomb any pirate who threatened the rescue team. Her flight patterns were not random animal behavior, but deliberate tactical maneuvers designed to create confusion and provide aerial surveillance. Pepper seemed to disappear completely, using shadows and debris to move unseen through the battle zone. She would appear suddenly to trip pirates at critical moments, then vanish again before they could react. What kind of creatures are these? Commander Score demanded as his warriors struggled to fight opponents who seemed to anticipate their every move. They are not creatures, Jiwoo replied calmly while helping an injured crystalline researcher to safety. They are family. The pirates found themselves facing something their harsh world had never taught them to handle. These animals fought with intelligence and coordination, but they also showed tactical restraint. The news of the research station Gamma 7 rescue spread across the galaxy like wildfire in a dry forest. Within hours, every major news network was broadcasting interviews with the rescued researchers, amazed pirates and galactic officials who struggled to understand what they had witnessed. But this time, the story was completely different from the fearful reports that had followed the Academy emergency. I saw Deathworld predators choose mercy over violence, reported Dr. Vala, a crystalline researcher who had been trapped for 3 days. The large canine creature could have crushed our captors, but instead it protected everyone equally, even the pirates who had threatened us. Those animals fought with honor, declared Commander Score in a broadcast that shocked his own species. They showed us that true strength comes from protecting the weak, not consuming them. Back at Nexus Academy, the 3 human students found themselves at the center of a completely transformed situation. Instead of fearful whispers and demands for expulsion, alien students now approached them with curiosity and genuine admiration. Sola drifted over to where Jiwoo was sitting with Bruno in the main study hall. Her light spores flickered with excitement rather than fear. "May I observe your pack partner's training routines?" she asked politely. "My species wishes to understand how different forms of consciousness can communicate so effectively." Bruno looked up at the floating jellyfish being and wagged his tail once, slowly. He seemed to understand that her intentions were friendly. "Bruno does not train," Jiwoo explained gently. "We practice together. Would you like to see how we communicate?" For the next hour, Sola watched in fascination as Jiwoo and Bruno demonstrated their partnership. The big dog would respond to subtle gestures and vocal tones, but he also made his own decisions and sometimes corrected Jiwoo when he made mistakes. It was clearly a conversation between equals rather than commands from master to servant. Thrix discovered Pepper in the Academy's maintenance tunnels, where the black cat was apparently teaching his worker bugs more efficient hunting techniques. The insect student's compound eyes whirred with amazement as he watched his tiny workers learn to move silently and coordinate, their efforts like a feline pride. "Your feline partner shows my workers tactics they never learned in the hive," Thrix observed. "She teaches them to think individually while working as a group." Pepper purred and rubbed against Thrix's armored leg, marking him with her scent as a sign of acceptance. The worker bugs seemed to understand this gesture, and began incorporating scent marking into their own communication patterns. Vex spent entire afternoons listening to Sky's various calls and cries, trying to understand how the hawk communicated complex tactical information to Minji. During flight, her crystalline structure resonated with the bird's vocalizations, creating harmonious music that seemed to facilitate better understanding between species. Your sky hunter creates frequencies that bridge the gap between different types of consciousness, Vex explained to Minji. She translates spatial awareness into sounds that ground-based beings can comprehend. The changes extended far beyond individual interactions. Director Counselor Zephys called a special academy-wide assembly to address the fundamental shift in understanding that was taking place throughout the galactic community. Students of Nexus Academy, his ancient voice resonated through the Great Hall. We have witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. We have seen apex predators from a death world demonstrate that evolution's greatest achievement is not the ability to destroy, but the capacity to cooperate. The assembly hall was filled with representatives from dozens of species, but now they listened with wonder rather than fear as the director continued. For too long, we have misunderstood what we saw when we looked at human-animal partnerships. We saw domination where humans demonstrated cooperation. We saw weapons where humans showed us family. We saw danger where humans offered us the greatest gift one species can give another, the choice to be friends instead of enemies. In the weeks that followed, the Academy established entirely new programs based on what they had learned from observing human-animal partnerships. The Department of Symbiotic Species Relations became the most popular field of study, with students from across the galaxy eager to understand how different forms of consciousness could work together so effectively. Professor Cleet, the nervous rabbit-like xenobiology instructor, found his classes completely transformed. Instead of studying predator adaptations as sources of fear, students now examined them as examples of how evolution could create cooperation rather than competition. The key insight, Professor Cleet explained to his fascinated students, is that humans did not domesticate these species through force or manipulation. Instead, both humans and animals made evolutionary choices to work together because cooperation provided better survival outcomes than competition. The impact extended far beyond the Academy itself. The Galactic Council received formal reports that revolutionized their understanding of human capabilities and potential contributions to interstellar civilization. Ambassador Drex, who had initially accused the humans of bringing weapons to the Academy, now found himself leading a diplomatic mission to establish formal partnerships between the Scar Fleet and Earth's government. My species has always believed that strength comes from the ability to dominate others, he admitted, during a council session that was broadcast throughout the galaxy. But we have learned that true strength comes from the ability to help others become stronger. Deathworld humans and their animal partners showed us what evolution looks like when cooperation triumphs over competition. The council voted unanimously to establish Earth as a center for interspecies cooperation research. Dozens of peaceful alien civilizations requested permission to send delegations to study human-animal partnerships as models for their own interspecies relations, but perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy understood the concept of family itself. Species that had evolved in isolation, where family meant only others of the same genetic line, began to grasp the revolutionary idea that family could be chosen rather than inherited. They started to understand that the strongest bonds were not necessarily between similar beings, but between different beings who chose to trust and protect each other. The 3 human students became informal ambassadors for this new understanding. They traveled to different worlds with their animal companions, demonstrating how partnerships could form across species barriers and how cooperation could create outcomes that no individual species could achieve alone. On Crystalia, Minji and Sky worked with crystalline engineers to develop new communication systems that could translate between radically different types of consciousness. The Hawk's spatial awareness combined with crystalline harmonic processing created breakthrough technologies in interspecies diplomacy. On the Hive worlds, Jiwoo and Bruno helped establish new protocols for individual autonomy within collective societies. The dog's pack instincts provided a model for how individual decision-making could coexist with group coordination. On the desert worlds of the former Scarfleet territories, Hyun and Pepper introduced concepts of stealth and patience to warrior cultures that had previously valued only direct confrontation. The cat's hunting strategies became the foundation for new approaches to conflict resolution that emphasized precision over brute force, but it was back at Nexus Academy where the most important changes took place. In the same assembly hall where the tribunal had once debated whether to expel the human students, Director Counselor Zephys now hosted celebration events where beings from dozens of species gathered to learn from each other. The highlight of these celebrations was always the demonstration of Earth-animal partnerships, but now they included holographic displays of other human-animal relationships. Students who had once cowered in fear now laughed with delight as they watched dolphins working with human researchers, horses carrying human partners across vast distances, and even house cats providing companionship to human families. One evening, as the Academy's artificial sunset painted the observation decks in warm colors, Jiwoo sat with Bruno beside the great windows that looked out onto the star fields. Around them, students from a dozen different species were studying together, sharing knowledge and forming friendships that would have been impossible just months before. A young Lumina student, barely old enough to maintain independent light patterns, drifted over to them with the curiosity that only children possess. "Human Jiwoo," the young being asked in their musical voice, "how did you know your pack partner would choose friendship instead of predation?" Jiwoo looked down at Bruno, who was peacefully watching the stars while allowing several small alien students to use him as a comfortable resting place. The big dog's tail wagged gently as one of them patted his head in gratitude. "We did not know for certain," Jiwoo admitted, "but we offered friendship first and gave them the choice. Most beings, when given the option between fear and trust, will choose trust if you are willing to be vulnerable first." The young Lumina's light patterns flickered with understanding, so the secret is not being strong enough to force others to cooperate, but being brave enough to trust that they will want to cooperate. "That is exactly right, Jiwoo,"